Lillian was helping young Leo piece together a complex puzzle, their quiet focus punctuated by the gentle clatter of shapes, when a voice like ice shards shattered the peaceful moment. She looked up to see Oliver Blackwell standing at the living room doorway, his frame rigid, his expression set in an unyielding mask. "I need to talk to you alone." Lillian paused, a giraffe-shaped puzzle piece suspended in her fingers. "Is something wrong with Leo?" "No," Oliver replied, his gaze unwavering. "It's about tonight. You're coming with me to the company party." She blinked, confusion clouding her eyes. "Sorry, what?" Oliver crossed his arms, an air of impatient finality about him. "You are accompanying me to the gala where something appropriate." Lillian stood quickly, her mind still reeling from his pronouncement. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwell, but I was hired as a nanny, not for social engagements." "Tonight you'll be both," he stated flatly. "The person who was supposed to come canceled at the last minute. I require a +1. You are here. Problem solved." She raised an eyebrow, a spark of indignation igniting in her eyes. "That's not in the contract." "It is now." He turned sharply on his heel, as if the discussion was utterly concluded. "Hold on." Lillian followed him into the hallway, her voice carrying a newfound edge. "You honestly think you can just summon me like you're ordering a pizza?" Oliver turned slowly, his face an impenetrable mask. "I pay well. I've already arranged someone to care for Leo tonight, and I've hired a stylist for you. Dress, hair, everything." Lillian crossed her arms, her stance unyielding. "Something wrong with my hair?" He took a slow, measured breath, his composure unwavering. "What's already nice can always be even better." She scoffed, sensing the arrogant dismissal in his tone. "Be ready by 8 p.m. you. Pio 40 Pius 8 b.m. Don't be late." And with that, he departed. Lillian stood alone in the hallway, her heart thudding a furious rhythm against her ribs, her eyes fixed on the door that had just closed. She walked back to the living room where Leo was watching her, curiously clutching a puzzle piece. "You're going out with Dad?" he asked. She took a deep breath, forcing a small smile. "Looks like it, buddy, but what about our dinosaur?" "He'll have to wait," she replied, softening her voice. "Tonight I'll be kind of like a princess." Leo smiled, not fully grasping the situation. Lillian settled back onto the rug, attempting to project an aura of calm, but inside, she was seething. Oliver Blackwell believed he could control everything and everyone, and perhaps within his sphere, he usually could. But she refused to simply fall in line and obey. If she was going to that dinner, it would be on her own terms, a silent declaration to him and to the world that she was more than just a nanny with a messy resume and an unfinished degree. Precisely 5 minutes past 7, the doorbell chimed, announcing the arrival of Grace, the stylist. Short and radiating infectious cheer, she swept into the house as if on a thrilling secret mission, a portable rack laden with dresses fit for a red carpet trailing in her wake. "Miss Lillian, let's bring out your beauty," Grace exclaimed, her eyes gleaming with artistic fervor. "I love working with raw, authentic material." "Raw material?" Lillian questioned, an eyebrow arched. "In a good way, dear. You're beautiful. You just need a little help." With a hesitant sigh, Lillian surrendered, allowing Grace to take charge. The transformation began with soft, accentuating makeup, followed by a simple yet elegant updo, with loose, natural waves gently framing her shoulders before finally a flowing red dress of undeniable class. Cut that effortlessly highlighted her slim waist and the elegant curve of her shoulders. When she finally looked in the mirror, she barely recognized the reflection. Not because she saw someone else, but because for the first time in a very long while, she saw something she hadn't allowed herself to see. Her best version. At precisely 7:58 p.m., calm and composed, she descended the grand mansion stairs. Oliver was waiting in the foyer, making a slight adjustment to his tie. The moment his eyes landed on her, he froze. He didn't speak a word at first, a silence that, coming from him, was almost poetic. His gaze swept over the dress, the subtle elegance of her hair, the understated glint of her simple earrings. Then, his eyes met hers. There was a flicker of surprise and perhaps a hint of admiration. "You look acceptable," he finally stated, clearing his throat. Lillian smiled, tilting her head slightly. "Not too bad for someone you hired as a nanny, huh?" Oliver ignored the barb, simply extending his arm. She took it, a hint of sarcasm in her grip. "I'm going for me, just so you know." "Fine," he conceded, his voice even. "As long as you smile in the photos and don't spill wine on anyone, your reasons are your own." As the front door swung open and the waiting car became visible outside, Lillian felt a knot tighten in her stomach. It was just one night, a show, a performance. But something deep inside her whispered that things would never truly be the same again. The ballroom at the Westwood Hotel sparkled with an opulent display of gold and crystal. It was the night of the annual Blackwell Holdings event, where corporate numbers were subtly discussed behind clinking toasts, and appearances held as much weight as contracts. Oliver stepped into the room with Lillian by his side, and for a fleeting moment the lively hum of conversation seemed to pause. She stood beside him, a striking figure in red. Her dress, made of a light flowing fabric, fit her naturally, without being ostentatious. Her bare shoulders revealed a posture of effortless grace, and her hair, styled in loose, soft waves, moved gently with the air conditioning. There were no flashy jewels or heavy makeup, just an aura of pure elegance. The first to truly register their entrance was Meredith Kensington, Oliver's ex-fiancée and a prominent member of one of Chicago's most traditional families. She was engaged in conversation with two company executives when she slowly turned, as if sensing the shift in the room's energy. Her eyes narrowed, then froze on the vibrant red dress. "Oh," Meredith drawled, a thin sideways smile playing on her lips. "Did you bring a date tonight?" Oliver offered only a curt nod in response. Lillian remained poised at his side, a subtle smile gracing her lips, not wide, not shy, simply confident. It was the smile of someone who felt no need to prove anything. "Hello?" Lillian extended her hand politely. "Lillian Cruz?" Meredith took her hand with just two fingers, as if handling something delicate. "Charmed. We hadn't met yet. Interesting color choice." Her gaze drifted over the dress, lingering. "Red is quite bold, very noticeable." "That's right," Lillian replied, her smile unwavering. "Being invisible never really appealed to me." Meredith forced a muffled, almost choked laugh. "And do you work at Blackwell Holdings?" "Something like that," Lillian answered in a neutral tone. "Interesting," Meredith mused, turning to the men beside her. "Lately, the company has been adopting some rather creative inclusion policies." Oliver cleared his throat, his voice low. "Meredith, if you're implying something—" "Oh, of course not," she shot back, her tone dripping with mock innocence. Smiling. "I'm just saying it's admirable to see the company investing in alternative talent." Lillian stepped forward slightly, tilting her head just a bit. "You know, I really admire women like you." "Really?" Meredith seemed genuinely caught off guard. Of course, Lillian continued, her voice smooth. It takes courage to wear a dress with so many layers and still walk as if you're floating, keeping your balance in those heels. That's an art. Meredith couldn't quite tell if it was a genuine compliment or a subtle dig. And that was exactly the effect Lillian intended. Oliver looked at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. It had been elegant, clever, and oddly fun. In the minutes that followed, many eyes turned their way as they walked toward the main table. Lillian maintained her composed posture, greeting people with polite ease, but no unnecessary fuss. There was something about her, a compelling mix of simplicity and quiet confidence, that was undeniably intriguing. "Are you all right?" Oliver murmured under his breath as they settled at the table. "I'm great," she replied calmly, picking up her napkin. "By the way, you should smile more. Your face looks much friendlier when it's frozen." He raised an eyebrow. "You know you're talking to the company president, right? And you know you're talking to someone who isn't afraid of presidents, right?" Oliver didn't answer, but the corner of his mouth threatened to curve into a smile. Dinner was served in courses, each dish meticulously presented. Lillian remained observant, subtly taking in the movements of the guests around her. Every detail seemed rehearsed. The bursts of polite laughter, the clinking toasts, the hushed exchange of business cards. It was corporate theater, and surprisingly, she seemed to instinctively understand the script. By the second glass of sparkling wine, Meredith reappeared, this time with an elegant gentleman at her side. "Oh, dear," she purred, a predatory sparkle in her eye. "This is Mr. Beaumont, one of our French investors in green energy. He wanted to meet your guest." "Miss Cruz," the man greeted, extending his hand. "A pleasure. We were just saying how your presence has been notable." Lillian shook his hand firmly. "Very kind. It's a pleasure as well." "Do you work in development?" he asked, a hint of curiosity in his tone. Oliver opened his mouth to correct him, but Lillian was quicker. "I've been following some of the company's social projects," she stated smoothly, "especially those focused on accessibility. I believe technology is only true progress if it includes people, not excludes them." Beaumont looked at her with genuine interest, his eyebrows rising slightly. "Very well put." Meredith pursed her lips, a hint of annoyance flickering across her face. "In Paris, for example," Lillian continued, a confident smile playing on her lips, "there are community solar energy models that don't just supply power, but also train local residents to manage the systems. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Lumiere project data." Beaumont looked visibly impressed. "Yes, of course. It's one of our pilot projects. I think it's fascinating. I read last quarter's report. The impact curve is quite promising." Oliver watched her, a clear expression of surprise on his face. He had no idea she read corporate reports. "Miss Cruz," Beaumont said, his voice now laced with genuine respect, "would you be open to scheduling a meeting? I'd be curious to hear your ideas." Lillian nodded, her smile still radiant. "I'd be happy to." When Beaumont finally walked away, Meredith turned to them, her composure visibly shaken, stayed silent for a few seconds. "Wow," she finally said, a hint of grudging admiration in her voice. "You really are full of surprises." "You learn fast when you pay attention," Lillian responded, her gaze steady. "And I pay very close attention." Meredith forced a thin smile, and with a subtle shift, disappeared into the moving crowd. Oliver turned to Lillian, still visibly processing what he had just witnessed. "Where did you learn about community energy?" he asked, a rare note of genuine curiosity in his tone. "I haven't been a nanny my whole life, Mr. Blackwell," she replied, a faint smile playing on her lips. "I had plans before I had to reinvent myself." "Reinvent?" he mused, a thoughtful pause. "Surviving takes creativity." He remained quiet for a few seconds, absorbing her words. "You made a good impression." "I'm glad," she said simply. "I'm not here to make a bad one. Beaumont actually thought you were an executive. Maybe one day I will be." Lillian shrugged. "Who knows?" Oliver held his wine glass, watching her carefully, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "What else do you know that you haven't shared?" She looked at him, a mischievous spark dancing in her eyes. "That? You'll have to find out." The morning after the gala, Oliver Blackwell found himself unable to focus on anything. The meticulously prepared financial report from the Seattle branch lay ignored on his desk. A crucial call from the legal director was postponed. Even his usual strong black coffee tasted off, flat and unappealing. All of it. Disrupted by a woman in a red dress who was supposed to be nothing more than his son's nanny. Lillian had irrevocably disturbed the smooth, predictable world he took so much pride in managing. He found her in the backyard, sitting with Leo under the shade of a large tree, both engrossed in drawing dinosaurs with colored chalk. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore a loose blouse and jeans, a stark contrast to the previous night. Yet her presence was just as impactful, steady, confident, and utterly focused. "We need to talk," Oliver declared, cutting into their peaceful moment like a jarring fire alarm. Lillian stood up slowly, dusting chalk from her hands. "Is this about the dinner?" "It's about the reaction to the dinner." He glanced at Leo. "Can you give us a minute, champ?" Leo pouted for a second, then, clutching a handful of chalk, dutifully ran inside. "What is it?" Lillian asked, crossing her arms. "Last night you made quite an impression, a positive one. All the investors were talking. Some even thought you were a new executive. It greatly helped the company's image, and mine, too." She raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "Are you thanking me?" "Not exactly." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare sign of agitation. "I'm offering something. A deal. I need you to keep pretending to be my girlfriend for the next 2 months." Lillian let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You're kidding." "I'm serious. We have a lot of important business and social events coming up. My reputation and the company's would significantly benefit if I were seen consistently with someone like you. Someone like me, smart, well-spoken, and already part of the act, by the way." She looked at him for a few seconds, her gaze piercing. "And what's in it for me?" "A generous bonus," he stated. "And if you agree, we can update your contract with new terms." "So, I'd have to dress like a magazine model, walk next to you smiling, and stay quiet when the rich folks in your world start talking nonsense." "You're free to respond," Oliver clarified, "as long as it's with class." "All right." Lillian took a step closer, her expression resolute. "Then here are my conditions. First, full autonomy with Leo. I take care of him my way. Second, I dress how I want, whether it's for a party or coffee in the park. Third, no orders outside of what we specifically agree on. And fourth," she paused, a challenging glint in her eyes, "there's more." "There is. I get to decide when this act ends. If I feel it's time to stop before 2 months are up, that's it. No debate." Oliver hesitated for a moment, his gaze unwavering, then he slowly nodded. "Deal." "Great. She held out her hand, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. "We have ourselves a fake agreement." He shook it, and in that quick, firm touch, something unspoken, a quiet understanding, seemed to pass between them. In the weeks that followed, Lillian's presence in Oliver's life grew stronger, extending far beyond the confines of business events. She was there when Leo stubbornly refused to eat his vegetables, when the neighbor's dog somehow found its way into their meticulously manicured yard, and even when the house alarm blared mistakenly at 4 in the morning. Oliver discovered that Lillian could spontaneously make up songs to coax Leo into brushing his teeth, that she danced around the kitchen when she thought no one was watching, and that she read company reports purely out of curiosity, leaving him notes with suggestions that, to his astonishment, actually made perfect sense. "You know, this solves a problem our team hasn't been able to fix in 3 months, he admitted one evening, holding one of her detailed notes. "It just takes a little common sense," she replied calmly, sipping her tea with her bare feet propped up on the couch. "You all live in such a bubble, you forget how regular people think." "Did you just politely call me out of touch?" he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Thanks, I think." They looked at each other for a moment, then laughed like old friends, though it was clear they weren't quite there yet. Their agreement encompassed a whirlwind of formal dinners, power lunches, glossy magazine photo shoots, and even a yacht trip with European shareholders. Lillian always dressed elegantly in her own unique way, and invariably stood out with her light, yet sharp, sense of humor. She never tried to fit into that world, and paradoxically, that was precisely what made her shine within it. "Your girlfriend is fascinating," one of the investors remarked during a particularly lavish dinner. Oliver simply nodded, unsure how to properly respond. Later that night, driving back with Lillian in the passenger seat, he said, "You received a lot of compliments." "That's because I know when to smile and when to throw in a joke," she explained, a knowing look on her face. "The trick is making a provocation look like charm. You like to provoke and you like to control, so we're even." But the true impact of Lillian's presence wasn't just at the events, it was at home. Leo began to transform. He used to be shy and quiet, but now he talked more, smiled more. He asked endless questions, drew non-stop, and every morning he waited for Lillian with unbridled excitement. One evening, Oliver came home early and found the two of them under a blanket, watching cartoons with popcorn scattered across the couch. Leo was fast asleep, his head resting gently on Lillian's lap. Oliver stood still, simply observing the tender scene. Lillian made a quiet gesture, a silent plea for him not to wake the boy. He walked over and, almost without conscious thought, sat down beside her. They remained there in silence for several minutes, sharing the quiet, comforting breath of a home that had finally found its peace. "He's a lot happier," Oliver said softly, his voice barely a whisper. "He just needed real attention," Lillian replied, her gaze fixed on the sleeping boy. "Time, patience, and someone who isn't always watching the clock." "Am I that someone who's always watching the clock?" "I didn't say that," she smiled, a soft, knowing curve of her lips. "But if you want a tip, try learning the names of his toys." Oliver looked down at the green dinosaur figure clutched in his son's hands. "That one's Green Dino. He's Theo, and he's blue," she whispered, laughing softly. "Looks like I have a lot to learn. At least you admit it." The next morning, Leo was engrossed in drawing on the porch while Oliver attempted to read the newspaper, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. Lillian was in the kitchen, the scent of sizzling pancakes wafting through the air. "Daddy, huh?" Leo piped up suddenly, his voice surprisingly clear. "Can Lillian be my new mom?" Oliver almost dropped his coffee cup. "What?" Leo, with the most serious expression in the world, pointed to the drawing he had just completed. It depicted him, Lillian, and Oliver holding hands, with a smiling dog trotting happily beside them. "She tells me stories. She gives me baths without complaining. She makes me laugh, and she understands me just like Mommy did." Oliver looked at the drawing, then at his son, his mind racing. "That's not quite that simple, Leo. But it would be nice, right?" Oliver found himself speechless. He simply reached out and gently ruffled the boy's hair. Lillian appeared at the door, spatula in hand, a questioning look on her face. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Oliver said, standing up a little too quickly. "Leo's just imagining things." She noticed his flushed expression but didn't press. Instead, she served breakfast with a calm, warm smile. "Imagination is one of the best things a child can have." Oliver didn't reply. But when he looked at the drawing again on the porch, a silent realization dawned on him. The boy wasn't the only one imagining things. He was too. That night, Oliver sat alone in his office, sifting through photos from recent events. In every single one, Lillian was by his side, smiling, conversing, sometimes looking at him with that captivating mix of challenge and sweetness he still couldn't quite decipher. The plan had been to pretend, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to remember what was pretend and what was unequivocally real. The sky that Monday morning was overcast, as if the weather itself knew something monumentally important was about to unfold. Oliver strode quickly through the polished halls of Blackwell Holdings, phone pressed to his ear, his nerves taut. "He has appendicitis today?" Oliver's voice came out somewhere between shock and outright panic. On the other end, his assistant attempted to calm him. "Yes, sir. David is already at the hospital, but unfortunately he won't be able to attend the Horizon Project presentation to the International Investor Board." Oliver hung up, without replying. The critical meeting was just an hour away, and the Horizon Project, a bold, high-stakes plan for urban restructuring with a significant social focus, was a risky bet. It demanded more than just cold numbers. It needed soul, meaning, and now, without David, their lead presenter, he had no one to convey that. He stepped into his office, uncertain of what to do, and took a deep, shaky breath. That's when he heard footsteps behind him. "Is everything okay?" It was Lillian carrying a folder containing Leo's drawings from the night before. "No," Oliver replied plainly, running a hand through his hair. "Our lead executive for Horizon is out, and this presentation could decide a $20 million investment." Lillian was silent for a moment. Then she placed the drawings carefully on his desk, brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, and met his gaze. Her, hair back, and said, "I can help." "This isn't one of those moments where you offer to make tea, is it?" he asked, a hint of desperation in his voice. "No," she smiled, a small, confident curve of her lips. "But if you want, I can do that too. What I'm saying is, you showed me the reports. We've talked about this project many times, and what it's missing is exactly what I can offer. Humanity." She said it simply, yet with unwavering conviction. "The numbers are good, but the story behind them needs to be told by someone who understands people." Oliver watched her for a few seconds, his mind racing through the options, or lack thereof. "You don't have experience giving presentations?" he finally said, though the words felt hollow. Then, a slow smile spread across his face. One of those involuntary smiles that slip out before logic can stop them. "And you don't have many options, remember?" Half an hour later, the investors began to enter the room. Big names, impeccably pressed ties, carefully controlled smiles. These were the sharpest eyes in the sustainable urban development field. Oliver gave the introduction, brief and to the point. Then he stepped back, handing the microphone to Lillian. She walked to the front of the room with the unhurried ease of someone who did this every day. She wore a simple white blouse beneath a beige blazer, her hair loose, falling softly on her shoulders. "Good morning, my name is Lillian Cruz," she began, her voice clear and resonant. "I'm not an engineer or an architect or an economist, but I know exactly what it's like to grow up in a neighborhood where cracked sidewalks teach you to jump over holes before you even learn to read." The investors exchanged glances, a ripple of quiet surprise moving through the room. This was not what they had expected. "The Horizon Project aims to turn forgotten neighborhoods into real communities," she continued, her gaze sweeping over their faces. "With street lighting, green spaces, accessibility, but more than that, it aims to bring dignity." She clicked the remote, and a slide appeared on the screen, showing a stark image of a rundown park. "This place," she said, her voice softening, "was the backyard of my childhood, where mothers took turns chasing away rats, where kids ran around in worn-out sandals but smiled like they owned the world. Today, it's abandoned. And that's why Horizon matters, because it brings back possibilities, because it plants seeds in neglected ground." Oliver watched from the side of the room, silent, utterly fascinated. "The project isn't just about renovating buildings," Lillian affirmed, her voice gaining strength. "It's about building bridges between people and their rights, between children and their opportunities, and between companies and their real impact on society." At the end of her presentation, there was a brief, profound silence. Then, the French investor, the same one who had met Lillian at the party, slowly raised his hand. "Miss Cruz, do you speak with such passion because you lived this?" "Yes," she answered firmly, her eyes meeting his directly. "And that's why I believe numbers alone don't change reality, but people do." The room erupted in applause. Oliver had never witnessed such an unprompted, enthusiastic reaction in a formal business meeting. When it was over and the investors began to leave, talking animatedly among themselves, visibly excited, Lillian turned to Oliver. "I think it worked." He just looked at her for a few seconds, a profound admiration in his eyes. "You didn't just save this presentation, Lillian. You transformed it." "I just told a real story," she said, a small, knowing smile. "People miss that, you know." "Miss you?" "No," she corrected, her smile widening. "The truth." Oliver was quiet for a moment, few seconds, then he just murmured, "Thank you. Always happy to help as long as it's part of the deal, of course." They both laughed, and the mood between them grew lighter, almost warm. Later that same day, already at home, Lillian was picking up Leo's toys when her phone buzzed with an email. The title read, "Official Social Collaboration Proposal, Vita Plano Foundation." She clicked on it. It was an invitation to be the national spokesperson for a new education and community development program based in another city, Boston. The project was serious, well-structured, with robust support from universities and corporations. The email praised her presentation earlier that day and stated she'd been highly recommended by one of the investors present. Lillian sat in silence for a while, the glowing screen illuminating her thoughtful face. On the screen, the terms were clear: competitive salary, housing, visibility, and purpose. A lot of purpose. She closed the laptop slowly. Later that night, sitting with Leo on the sofa, he looked at her with sleepy eyes. "Did you save Daddy's job today?" "Maybe just a little bit," she said softly, hugging him. Closer. Are you going to live here forever? She swallowed hard, feeling a knot tighten in her throat. I don't know, champ. If you go away, what will happen to us? She hugged him tightly, feeling her heart ache with an unfamiliar pain. I don't know yet, but I promise nothing really important will change. Leo fell asleep in her arms, and Lillian stayed there, looking out the window while the city lights shone outside, like countless opportunities that were finally beginning to appear on her horizon. The day seemed just like any other at Blackwell Holdings, but up on that glass-walled 8th floor with the hum of the air conditioner in the background, something fundamental had begun to shift. Oliver was sitting at his desk, staring at his laptop screen without truly seeing the numbers and charts before him. They made logical sense, but they no longer sparked the excitement they once did. All he could think about was Lillian, or rather, what she had done. Not just for the company, but for Leo, for him, and, most powerfully, for herself. She walked into the room naturally, holding a mug of tea and a folder full of notes. No high heels, no tailored suit, just a simple light dress and white sneakers. Yet, she carried an undeniable confidence that he now quietly admired. "Were you waiting for me?" she asked casually, a slight smile on her face. "Technically, yes." Oliver pointed to the folder on his desk. "I need your opinion on this new social project. The board wants to expand into the countryside, and I'd like to hear what you think." She sat down without hesitation. "Okay. Where's the catch?" "There is no catch," he said, a half-smile playing on his lips. "Just genuine curiosity. That's rare coming from you. I'm trying to get better. And I'm here to witness it." She smiled. They spent nearly an hour going through the documents, discussing ideas, and exploring possibilities. The mood between them was easy, almost familiar. But there was something else in the air, something unspoken, yet felt with every glance they shared. During a quiet pause, Oliver turned his eyes toward the vast city view outside the window. "Do you think some people are just born to carry the weight of the world?" Lillian stopped flipping through the documents, her gaze fixed on him. Pages. "No," she said, her gaze steady on him. "I think some people are raised that way and others learn because life gives them no choice." "My father was like that," Oliver said softly, his voice distant. "I grew up hearing that weakness wasn't an option, that every mistake meant failure. From a young age, everything was about goals, performance, perfection. I couldn't even mess up blowing out birthday candles." "That sounds suffocating." "It was," he sighed, a deep, weary breath. "I never got to choose what I wanted to be, only what I was supposed to be. And even now, sometimes I find myself trying to please someone who's no longer around." Lillian looked at him gently. For the first time, he didn't seem like the cold, untouchable CEO everyone knew. He looked like a man tired of carrying his armor. "And your mom?" she asked. "She died when I was 10. She was different, kind, patient. When she was gone, everything got tougher." He looked down, visibly moved by the memory. After a moment, Lillian spoke. "I lost my mom, too. More recently. I had to give up my scholarship when she got sick. I took care of her until the end." "You had a scholarship?" Oliver asked, surprised. "Yes, psychology, at the State University. I was going to be the first in my family to graduate, but when the illness came, my sister was still little. Someone had to hold everything together." "You took all that on by yourself?" "I did. I worked as a cashier, a waitress, a nanny. I did whatever I could, and I never looked back." Oliver stayed silent for a moment, the kind of silence that comes from profound understanding. "You're stronger than you look, and you're more fragile than you let on," she replied softly, almost to herself. They looked at each other, this time with no walls, no jokes, no games. The connection between them, built through shared glances and sarcastic banter, now had deeper roots, shared pain, resilience, the unspoken truth that even though they came from vastly different worlds, they both carried scars that shaped every step they took. Outside that fragile bubble of honesty, someone else was watching, with entirely different eyes. Meredith Kensington had been informed by an assistant that Oliver's new girlfriend had not only appeared at an official company event, but had spoken on behalf of the board and, astonishingly, impressed key investors. The discomfort was rapidly escalating into full-blown irritation. "Who is this woman?" she demanded of her personal team. "We're trying to gather more information. Her full name is Lillian Cruz. We have a previous address, records of her working as a nanny, caregiver, and store clerk, but very little in the official files. No college degree, just an old enrollment record. State University Psychology. Dropped out a few years ago. No diploma." Meredith folded her fingers together, her mind working furiously. "I want more. Everything you can find. Records, photos, old files, anything that could expose her." "You think she's pretending?" her assistant ventured. "I'm not sure," Meredith mused, her gaze hardening. "But I do know when someone is somewhere they don't belong. And if we don't find anything damaging, then we create a, story. Sometimes just planting the doubt is enough. The rest society will take care of." Meredith stood and walked to the window of her luxurious penthouse. From up there, everything looked like a game board. Looked under control. Just like it always had. But something about Lillian threw her off. She was charismatic, genuinely warm. And worse, she was starting to win people over, including Oliver. Meredith wasn't going to be replaced, especially not by someone who, in her view, didn't even belong in the room. At the office, Oliver and Lillian were saying goodbye after a long day. He was carrying a folder, and she had a notebook filled with her distinctive, handwritten notes. "Going to see Leo now?" he asked, holding open the elevator door. "Yes," she confirmed. "He wants to show me a chalk masterpiece. Get ready. He mixed dinosaurs with rockets." "Creativity's alive and well in that house," Oliver remarked dryly. They stepped into the elevator together. The comfortable silence that settled between them was a stark contrast to the early days of their working relationship. Now, it wasn't strange at all to share the quiet space. However, just a few floors from the lobby, the elevator shuddered and stopped. The lights flickered, then dimmed. "Was that planned?" Lillian asked, half laughing, half suspicious. "Unfortunately, no." Oliver pressed the emergency button, a slight frown creasing his brow. "It's happened before, but never with me inside." "Perfect. My debut in corporate events and stuck elevators." He tried to contact maintenance, but there was no signal. The building's generator had failed as well. Lillian leaned against the wall, crossing her arms. "Looks like we'll be here for a while. At least the air conditioning's working, and there's nothing to eat." Terrible combo. "You're hungry?" "I'm always hungry after 5. Survival rule from someone who once lived on 1 pack of crackers a day." Oliver looked at her again, that familiar mix of curiosity and admiration in his eyes. "You talk about things like that with such ease." "Because if I don't laugh, I cry. And crying won't help us get out of the elevator." He chuckled, more relaxed now. "You know, I used to think women like you only existed in movies. And I used to think men like you only existed in tax reports, she shot back, a playful glint in her eyes. Cold, arrogant, and soulless. Your words, not mine, he retorted, both of them laughing. But you know something, Oliver, she said, looking up at the ceiling of the elevator. Sometimes what we think we know isn't even half the story. And are you talking about me? About me, too. We protect ourselves so much, build walls, hide behind titles, behind sarcasm, and we miss what's real. He didn't say anything, just listened intently. Are you afraid? She asked, her voice softer now. Of the elevator? No. Of other things, maybe. Like what? Like letting myself feel something in a place where I was only supposed to work? He nodded slowly, his gaze meeting hers. I get that. More than you might think. Their eyes met. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything they hadn't yet found the words to say, and in that metal box, stuck between floors, there was more truth than in many of those glittering gala dinners. 30 minutes later, the elevator jolted, then slowly began to move again. When they stepped out into the lobby, they walked in comfortable silence to the parking lot. Thanks for the talk and for the company in captivity, he said, a genuine smile on his face. It was more fun than I expected, she replied. He hesitated for a moment, as if he wanted to say something more, something else, but he just nodded. Good night, Lillian. Good night, Oliver. They each went their own way. Neither of them knew that across the city, Meredith Kensington already had a file on Lillian spread across her desk and a meticulously crafted plan in mind. The dining room at Luxor, in the heart of Manhattan, was carefully designed to impress. A piano played softly in the background, its melodies weaving through the hushed conversations. Silverware gleamed and sparkled under the warm chandelier light, and Blackwell Holdings executives toasted with international investors over the successful close of a new round of deals. Oliver was there, looking elegant, yet undeniably tense. He wasn't a fan of such social events, but he knew this night mattered. And somehow, despite himself, he wished Lillian were there with him. But this time, she hadn't come. He hadn't invited her. He was still processing everything they'd been through, the elevator, the candid conversations, and all the crucial things they hadn't yet dared to say. That's when Meredith appeared, a vision in a flawless navy blue dress, the same confident, knowing sparkle in her eyes. She approached with effortless grace and took the empty seat beside one of the key British investors, Mr. Wilkins. Mr. Wilkins, have you met Oliver's companion? Meredith asked casually, swirling her glass of wine, her voice a practiced murmur. Oh, yes, the man replied, a pleasant smile on his face. The young woman who presented the Horizon Project. Very sharp. I was quite impressed. Meredith's smile widened, a touch of malice in its curve. She is impressive, isn't she? And to think she's actually his son's nanny. The words hit the center of the table like a sudden, chilling lightning strike. A few people exchanged startled glances. One waiter froze for a second before subtly continuing to pour wine. Oliver stared at Meredith, stunned, a cold knot forming in his stomach. She went on, as if merely commenting on the weather. Don't get me wrong, I admire the boldness. A nanny at the heart of strategic decision-making. It's modern, really, though personally I prefer professionals with proper qualifications. Meredith, Oliver started, his voice a low warning, but it faltered, unable to gain purchase. Mr. Wilkins cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. She seemed well prepared to me, no matter what her current job title is. Of course, Meredith smiled, her eyes glittering. But maybe the board deserves to know who's really influencing the company's decisions. Don't you think? The words hung in the air, heavy and loaded, and that was precisely when Lillian appeared. She had come to drop off a signed document at Oliver's assistant's request, unaware of the conversation unfolding. She wore a simple, elegant dress. Nothing flashy, but enough to make her stand out amongst the tailored suits and extravagant gowns. When she walked in and saw all eyes suddenly turn to her and Oliver's pale, strained expression, she felt it instantly. Something was terribly wrong. "Oh, what a coincidence," Meredith said loudly, her voice dripping with mock surprise. "We were just talking about you." Lillian stopped, her posture steady, her gaze unwavering. "I hope it was something useful." "It always is," Meredith replied, her smile not reaching her eyes. "We were just explaining to the investors that you're actually little Leo's nanny." The room fell silent once more, a suffocating quiet. Lillian took a deep breath. She didn't shrink back. She didn't flinch. She simply looked at each of their faces one by one. "Yes, I'm a nanny, and very proud of it," she said firmly, her voice clear and strong. "And before that I was a cashier, a clerk, a waitress, a caregiver, a cleaner. But no matter the job, I always did my best." She turned, her gaze settling directly on Meredith, to Oliver, waiting for him to say something, a gesture, a word, a sign of support. But he stayed silent, frozen, like he'd been completely blindsided, unable to find the strength to respond. "I see," Lillian said, her throat tight with emotion. "Thank you for reminding me where I came from, and especially where I don't want to stay." She turned and walked out. No tears, no drama, just a quiet dignity that left the room in stunned silence for long, heavy seconds. Hours later, Oliver was sitting alone in his office. Dinner long over, his mind raced, replaying the scene. Why hadn't he said anything? Why had he stayed silent when it mattered most? He closed his eyes, trying to find an answer that didn't sound like a hollow excuse. That's when he noticed, on a side table, a craft paper folder with colored tabs. "Project Portfolio Lillian Cruz." The cover read in neat handwriting. He opened it. Inside were detailed sketches, innovative ideas, intricate maps, thoughtful charts, social action plans, community education projects, neighborhood redevelopment proposals, and programs to support single mothers. All drawn by hand, with meticulous detail and palpable passion. The dates were old, showing these were things she had dreamed up and worked on long before taking her first nanny job. Oliver turned each page with a heavy heart. She was so much more than he had imagined, and so much more than the world had ever let her show. He felt a profound sense of shame for that night, for his silence, for being too slow, for letting her down. The next morning, the story had already spread far beyond the luxurious dining room. Business blogs speculated wildly about the nanny influencing key decisions at Blackwell Holdings. Some called her bold, others questioned the company's professionalism and ethics. On social media, opinions were sharply split, but most people praised Lillian's courageous stance. A short video of her words at the restaurant, secretly filmed by someone there, had already racked up thousands of views. The board was on high alert. "We need to control this narrative," the communications director insisted, his voice tense. "How?" Oliver asked, his gaze fixed on the frantic headlines. "By showing that the company values talent, that regardless of someone's background, we recognize their potential." Oliver stood up, his jaw set. "No. We need to do more than that. I need to do more than that." That same day, Lillian was packing her small suitcase in the employee apartment. She had already written a heartfelt thank you letter to the HR team, another for Leo, full of drawings and cherished memories, and a third, shorter one, for Oliver. Thank you for believing, even if only for a little while. I don't regret what I experienced, but I need to move on. Good luck with Blackwell, and please take good care of Leo. He deserves the world. She was about to close the door when she heard a knock. It was Oliver. He looked different. Tired, human, stripped of his usual impenetrable facade. "You really caught me off guard yesterday," he said after a moment, his voice low. "Welcome to the club," she replied, crossing her arms, a touch of weary sarcasm in her tone. "I should have said something." "I know. I was in shock. But that's no excuse." She looked at him steadily, her gaze unwavering. "No, it's not." He pulled the craft paper portfolio folder from his bag and held it out to her. "You should be leading a team, not picking up scattered toys." "I like the scattered toys," she stated simply. "And I like you," he said, plainly, the words cutting through the air, unexpected and sincere. She raised her eyebrows, genuinely surprised. "You like a nanny? Are you sure you can handle what people will say?" "I like an intelligent, brave woman who stood up to a room full of powerful people with her head held high, and who even made me laugh when the elevator broke," he stated, his voice unwavering. "That's what matters to me, Lillian, not what other people think." She took a deep breath, her eyes searching his. "You took too long to figure that out." "But I did figure it out," he insisted, taking a step closer. "And I'm here now." "You know what's funny?" she said, picking up her suitcase, a wry smile on her face. "You're telling me all this just when I got a job offer in Boston. A social project, one I helped inspire without even meaning to." Oliver looked at her, a profound worry etched on his face. "Are you going to say yes?" "I don't know yet." "What do I have to do to make you stay?" he asked, his voice raw. She looked him in the eyes, her gaze clear and unwavering. "Let me go if that's what needs to happen." And in that moment, he understood that love, true love, doesn't hold on. It lets go. Oliver wasn't exactly sure what he was looking for when he got in his car that morning and drove to the address Lillian had left in the company's records. But something in his chest told him he needed to see her. Not just to apologize, but to truly understand who she was. And maybe, for the first time, to understand who he himself truly was. The scenery slowly began to change. The gleaming tall buildings of the city center gave way to simpler, more modest structures. Small, family-owned stores lined the streets where barefoot kids ran along the sidewalks, their laughter echoing. It was a humble neighborhood, but one teeming with life. Colors, voices, tantalizing smells, and countless unspoken stories. He parked his car and took a moment to look around, unhurried, taking it all in. A group of kids played raucously near a community school. A few women chatted warmly in front of a bustling bakery, and around the corner he saw a modest building painted a comforting light blue with a vibrant banner hanging over its entrance, LS Viva Community Center. There, he saw a mural covered with children's drawings, heartfelt thank you notes, and faded photos taped to the wall. In many of them, Lillian was smiling brightly with other women and children, holding signs with uplifting phrases like, "Education changes lives," and "Together, we're stronger." He walked up to the entrance and was greeted by an older woman with kind, graying hair, wearing a t-shirt with the center's logo. "Are you looking for someone?" she asked gently. Yes, I'm looking for Lillian Cruz, he said, feeling almost embarrassed, his voice softer than usual. Oh, Lillian. The woman's eyes lit up with recognition and warmth. She helped start this place. I know she doesn't live here anymore, Oliver explained, but I wanted to understand more about what she did. The woman invited him inside. For nearly an hour, Oliver spoke with local residents, dedicated volunteers, and Lillian's former co-workers. He heard how she had painstakingly set up tutoring programs, organized ingenious fundraising sales to buy essential medicines, and provided vital emotional and legal support to single mothers in crisis. She had done all of it with no financial resources, just sheer determination and boundless compassion. She taught math in the mornings, took care of the elderly in the afternoons, and still found time to bake bread to sell at night, one neighbor recounted, her eyes twinkling with admiration. And she never stopped smiling. One time, another chimed in, the school had a gas leak. No one knew what to do. She's the one who called the fire department and led the evacuation. She was always the one to step up. You'd never think she was just in her 20s, said another. Each story he heard was like a light turning on in Oliver's mind. He felt a deep shame for reducing her to a role, a label, and at the same time, he was profoundly moved by discovering a woman so whole, so much more than he had ever imagined. Before leaving, he asked to visit the house where she had lived with her sister. They took him to a small, two-story home, humble but well-kept. Lillian's sister, Clara, was sitting on the porch, diligently studying with a notebook on her lap. She had the same bright, knowing eyes as her sister. You must be Oliver, Clara said, cutting straight to the point. He nodded, a bit surprised. She talked about me. She did a lot, Clara replied, but not all of it was praise. I figured, he replied with a half-smile. She cared about you, Clara continued, her voice softening. And that's what hurt the most, because she didn't expect you to protect her from the world. She just hoped you wouldn't be part of it when it turned against her. Oliver said nothing, absorbing the weight of her words. I made a lot of mistakes with her. We can tell, Clara said, closing her notebook and standing up. But if you came all the way out here, maybe there's still a chance to fix things. Back in the city, Oliver got home late in the afternoon. The first thing he saw was Leo drawing alone in the living room, a quiet, solitary figure. The boy looked up at him with big, questioning eyes and asked simply, Dad, where's Lillian? Oliver knelt beside his son, his heart aching. She had to go, buddy. But why? I like her. She told me funny bedtime stories, and she taught me how to make a heart with my hands. He demonstrated the gesture, his little eyes welling up with tears. Oliver hugged him tightly. I know, Leo. I like her, too. Then go get her, the boy said, his voice brimming with total innocent honesty. His father smiled, his eyes full of a newfound understanding. Kids know things. 2 days later, Lillian received an unexpected message. Oliver was asking her to meet for coffee at the park where they used to take Leo in the evenings. She hesitated. Part of her yearned to see him again, despite the sting of recent memories. Another part still hurt, felt humiliated, disappointed. But curiosity and her heart spoke louder. She arrived on time, dressed simply in jeans and a blouse, her hair in a loose bun. When she saw him sitting on the bench with a familiar bakery box in his lap, she took a deep breath. I brought an apple pie from your favorite bakery, he said, standing up as she approached. So, you've been digging into my life, she asked, a wry amusement in her voice. Let's just say I went looking for answers where I should have from the start. He gestured to the bench. She sat down, maintaining a bit of distance between them. What do you want, Oliver? He looked at her seriously, his gaze earnest. I want to say I'm sorry for staying silent, for judging you, for treating you like less when you were more. Took you long enough, she murmured, a faint smile touching her lips. I know, he admitted, but I'm here now and I want to show you something. He handed her a slim folder. Inside was an official document, a project approved by Blackwell's board, an expansion proposal for the LS Viva Community Center, fully funded by the company. I took your portfolio to the board. I showed them who you are and what you can do, he said, his voice filled with pride. Not only did they approve it, they wanted you to lead it. Lillian looked at the papers, stunned, her hands trembling slightly. Is this for real? Completely. You'll be the director of the new social impact program. Full independence, your own team, a brand new office in New York. Anywhere you want. She took a deep breath, the implications of his words washing over her. This changes a lot of things. I hope it does, Oliver said, his voice softer. But it doesn't change what happened between us. He lowered his eyes, then met her gaze again. I know, but I also know that you're the only person I want to share all of this with. Work, life, fears, and Leo misses you every day. She fought back the swell of emotion. I don't trust you anymore, Oliver. He nodded quietly, accepting her honesty. But I want to trust you again, she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. That's up to you. His eyes lit up with a fragile hope. Then let me prove it. One day at a time. Starting now. Starting now. He held out his hand, an offering. She looked at it for a second, then, with a slight tentative smile, she took it. Oliver's office was quiet that morning. The large windows let in the crisp, natural light, and the city skyline looked somehow farther away than usual. On the desk lay a single light brown envelope, neatly marked with the name Lillian Cruz. He ran his fingers over the surface of the paper, hesitant. He had drafted that offer with help from legal, HR, even marketing. But it was more than just a job offer. It was a genuine attempt to rebuild something, to fix what he could no longer ignore. With a deep breath, he picked up his phone and sent the message. I need to talk to you today. No games. At the agreed time, Lillian entered the Blackwell building, this time as a guest, not an employee. She wore a crisp white button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled up and dark jeans. Her hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and she carried a leather folder under her arm. Upstairs, the receptionist greeted her with a hesitant, almost reverent smile. Everyone knew who she was now, and everyone was talking. Oliver stood waiting. When she walked in, he didn't smile or move too close. He respected her space, the invisible barrier she might still need. Thanks for coming. Nice to hear you say please, she replied, sitting with a steady, composed posture. You asked me to change. I'm trying, he said as he sat down too. Here's the offer. I'd like you to read it before saying anything. She opened the envelope and read carefully, silently absorbing each word. Social Impact Coordinator, Blackwell Holdings, full-time contract, competitive salary, full project autonomy, freedom to choose her team, budget guaranteed. She looked up, her gaze scrutinizing him. Looks good, but I've learned that in this company what looks good can be just for show. Not this time. It's real. Then here are my terms. She pulled out a printed sheet from her folder. I want complete freedom to define the areas of work. No vetoes from the board. My team will be chosen entirely by me. No one sent in to keep an eye on things. Done. Social reports won't become marketing material. I want real action, not just pretty pictures for social media. I agree. And our relationship will be strictly professional. No lunches, no dinners, no meetings or comments outside the work environment. Oliver nodded, his expression serious. I understand and I accept. Good. In that case, we can begin. She extended her hand. He shook it firmly. An agreement. An invisible agreement of respect had just been sealed. Lillian was met with curious looks and hushed whispers during her first few days in her new role. Some watched with admiration, others with lingering doubt. But she wasn't fazed. She started at the ground level, holding informal meetings with employees from every department, actively listening, and making frequent visits to areas of the company that had long been overlooked. She meticulously built her team, selecting individuals who, like her, had often been underestimated. A brilliant intern from a Latin background, a senior analyst with a quiet passion for inclusion, and a former public school teacher with invaluable experience in community programs. In the following weeks, Lillian led internal workshops on empathy in the workplace, launched a groundbreaking scholarship program for at-risk youth, and revitalized partnerships with local nonprofits focused on education and health. The impact was immediate. Headlines began appearing on prominent business news sites. Blackwell Holdings reinvents its social responsibility with new coordinator. And, from nanny to leader, Lillian Cruz's rise inspires change in the corporate world. Oliver watched everything unfold from a distance. He didn't interfere, respecting the terms of their professional agreement. But now and then, he'd walk past the new department and see her laughing with her team, coordinating things with an infectious passion. And in that smile, there was something he recognized, something he missed. One afternoon, while she was meticulously planning a visit to a new project in another neighborhood, Lillian was surprised to find a small note left on her desk. If you have time, I'd like to go with you just as an observer. No agenda. Oliver. She read it twice, her expression unreadable. She thought about refusing, upholding their strict professional boundary. But a part of her, a deep, quiet part, wanted him to truly see not her, but what she did, and why. The next day, he was there at the agreed time, dressed casually in dark jeans, sneakers, and an open-collar shirt. No security, no assistant. Just him. They went together to the community where Lillian had launched her latest project. One focused on helping women who were heads of households learn entrepreneurial skills. They're learning to make handmade soaps, candles, bread, Lillian explained as they walked through a bustling workshop. Later, they'll sell them at a small market we're setting up with microloans from the company. Oliver listened carefully, his eyes taking in every detail. This is more than a program. It's independence. Exactly, she affirmed. When a woman has her own income, the whole home changes. It changes her children's future. You should be in my entire board's place, he said, half joking, half admiring. She smiled, but didn't reply. At the end of the day, one of the women in the program, an elderly woman named Mrs. Rosa, came over to them, her face beaming. So, you're her boss? She asked Oliver directly. I'm her manager, Oliver corrected gently. Then make sure you value this young woman, Mrs. Rosa said, her voice firm. She's gold. She wasn't born rich, but she was born with a strength not many have. Oliver nodded, genuinely moved by the heartfelt testimony. "You're absolutely right." Lillian, standing a little distance away, heard every word, a quiet warmth spreading through her. Back at the company, the positive reports began to pile up. Blackwell's reputation improved significantly, far beyond what any marketing campaign could achieve. But what was truly impressive wasn't just the better public image. It was the tangible, personal stories from countless people whose lives had been genuinely transformed. Real people. Real stories. Oliver called a board meeting to share the extraordinary results. In 3 months, we've increased perceived institutional value by 18%. We've improved internal talent retention by 12%, and we've earned genuine credibility, where before there was only speculation. And all of this? He looked at Lillian, who was seated quietly among the senior leaders, her presence a powerful statement. Is thanks to her. Some directors applauded, others swallowed their pride, but they all knew this woman had profoundly changed the company. That night, Lillian was the last to leave the building. She was walking through the silent, empty halls when she heard footsteps behind her. "Still working?" It was Oliver, just finishing up the last reports for next week's presentation. "Can I walk you to the elevator?" She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. They walked in comfortable silence, their footsteps echoing softly. Inside the elevator, he pressed the ground floor button and, looking at the panel, said, "I know you said you wanted to keep this professional, and I respect that, but I need to thank you. Not just for what you did for the company, but for what you did for me." She glanced at him, surprised by the unexpected sincerity in his voice. "Before you," he continued, his gaze fixed on the glowing floor numbers, "I thought I was strong because I didn't get involved, because I kept my distance. Now I see that real courage is opening up, facing what hurts. You showed me that, with your honesty, with your work, with the way you are." She lowered her eyes, a wave of complex emotions washing over her. "Oliver, I don't want to pressure you. I just wanted you to know." The elevator door opened. She walked toward the exit, and he followed her out onto the sidewalk. "Thank you for not trying to convince me," she said, her voice soft but clear. "That alone makes all the difference." He smiled, a genuine, relaxed smile. "I'm learning from the best." "Then keep learning, only if you stay here." "For now, I am." And in that moment, with no grand vows or explicit promises, something was undeniably starting again between them. Slowly, at the right pace, gradually, without formal plans or rigid rules. Lillian started going back to Oliver's house often. The reason was always the same: Leo. She said it was just because she missed him. And maybe that was true. But the truth was, those visits became an essential part of their routine. A new routine that no one, not even Oliver, dared to question. Every afternoon, after work, she showed up. She carried a bag filled with colorful books, paper for intricate folding crafts, and sometimes cookies she'd baked herself. Leo ran to the door the moment he heard the bell. "Aunt Lillian!" he shouted, hugging her legs tightly. She laughed, knelt down, and wrapped him in her arms. "Hey there, my astronaut! Ready for another space adventure?" When the sky grew dark, Lillian would take the boy up to his room and put him to bed. She had her own special routine: brushing teeth, picking a bedtime story, and then a lullaby. Sometimes she made up the lyrics on the spot. Other times, she sang an old tune her mother had taught her when she was little. Leo would fall asleep quickly, a peaceful smile on his face. Oliver, for his part, always watched from a distance. He never interrupted. He just observed, and felt something in his chest he still didn't know how to name. But it felt remarkably like peace. That Friday, the house was busier than usual. Blackwell Holdings was hosting a special dinner with international partners. It was a smaller, more intimate event than the gala, but an important one. One to strengthen relationships and introduce the company's new social initiatives. Lillian, as the impact coordinator, had been officially invited as part of the team. She arrived in a dark blue dress, elegant and modest, cinched at the waist with a thin belt. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and she wore small, understated earrings to complete the look. Nothing flashy, but when Oliver saw her, he was speechless for a moment, simply admiring her presence. "Good evening," she said, approaching him with a calm grace. "Is everything ready?" "It is now," he replied, a genuine warmth in his voice as he offered his arm. "May I?" She hesitated for a beat, then took his arm, and they walked in together, a striking pair. During dinner, Lillian was introduced to the international guests as the brilliant mind behind the initiatives that were actively reshaping both the image and the very heart of Blackwell Holdings. She spoke clearly, with grace and ease, explaining how each project was meticulously built around the true reality of the communities, emphasizing their inclusion of active listening, local autonomy, and long-term sustainable impact. The guests were visibly impressed, leaning forward, captivated by her words. "It's rare to hear someone speak about business with such a human touch," one of the Spanish executives remarked, genuine admiration in his voice. "You have an admirable view of the world, Miss Cruz." "Thank you," she replied, her smile radiant. "But the credit also goes to the team and to a CEO who had the courage to listen." Oliver watched silently, utterly captivated by her. After dinner, the guests began to say their goodbyes one by one, their voices filled with pleasant farewells. Soon only a few directors remained, and they, too, departed. Lillian stayed on the balcony, enjoying the light evening breeze that offered a brief respite from the warmth of the room. Oliver walked up, holding 2 glasses. "Sparkling water with lemon," he said, handing one to her. "I figured you'd prefer that over wine." "You guessed right," she replied, taking the glass with a small, appreciative smile. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out at the glittering city lights spread out below them. "You were amazing tonight," he finally said, his voice quiet, sincere. "I just did my job," she responded, almost dismissive. "No, you brought to life what this company was always meant to be." She turned slightly to face him, her gaze soft. "You know, Oliver, you seem different too. In a good way, I hope. In a more genuine way, more approachable. And that's surprisingly comforting." He looked at her with a softness she hadn't seen in him before, a vulnerability that disarmed her. "And you helped me see what I'd been missing," he said quietly. "Not just here, but in life." She looked away, a flush rising in her cheeks. "Don't say that like that." "Why not?" "Because it's hard not to believe you when you say it in that voice." "Then believe me, Oliver. I'm in love with you, Lillian." Silence. Cars passed in the distance, their sound muffled. The breeze was still gentle, a soft caress against their skin. Lillian looked into his eyes, searching for any trace of a lie, a trick, a manipulation, but all she saw was raw, undeniable truth. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." He moved closer, taking his time, giving her every opportunity to pull away. And when their faces were just inches apart, it was Lillian who closed the final distance. The kiss was slow, sincere, full of discovery and profound relief. It wasn't rushed or forced. It felt like they had finally found what they'd both been unconsciously avoiding for so long. When they finally pulled apart, she still had her eyes closed, as if wanting to hold on to the sensation. On to that moment for just one more second. "That wasn't in our agreement," she murmured, a soft smile blooming on her lips. "Then I think we need a new contract," he replied, resting his forehead gently against hers, his voice thick with emotion. The next morning, Leo was running around the living room with a wide, irrepressible grin. Oliver watched him, an amused tenderness in his eyes. "Already, astronaut?" "Yep. But what are we doing again?" "A special mission. Are you in?" "Always." They got into the car, and Leo clutched a colorful handmade envelope. "You think she'll like it?" "I'm sure of it," Oliver said, starting the engine. In the trunk, there was a small gift wrapped in vibrant red paper. It was the beginning of a plan Oliver had been meticulously working on for days. A special weekend, just for Leo and for Lillian. Something just for the three of them. Finally together. No roles, no masks, just who they really were. In the central square of the neighborhood where Lillian had launched one of her first transformative projects, a simple yet vibrant setup had been arranged. Colorful tents, bustling craft booths, lively cultural performances, and a small wooden stage surrounded by freshly arranged flowers. It was the first Community Day, an event organized by Lillian and her dedicated team to celebrate the remarkable progress of the social project supported by Blackwell. Children ran around, their laughter echoing, wearing shirts that proudly read, "My future starts here." Seniors sat in comfortable circles, listening to heartfelt stories, and women smiled, their faces beaming as they sold their beautifully handmade goods. It was a living, breathing picture of the positive chain reaction she had helped create. In the middle of the square, Oliver walked with Leo by his side. The boy was holding something carefully behind his back, trying to look serious, but the irrepressible sparkle in his eyes gave him away completely. "Do you remember our plan, astronaut?" Oliver whispered. "Yes." Leo nodded vigorously. "When you give me the signal, I'll hand over the little box. But only when you say that part." "That's right," Oliver smiled, a warm light in his eyes. "And don't worry. It's going to be just fine." Leo nodded, then looked around, eagerly searching for Lillian. When he spotted her on stage, helping one of the organizers set up the microphones, he pointed and smiled. "She looks really pretty today, Dad." "She always has, buddy. I just took too long to see it." The event opened with a series of simple, heartwarming presentations, testimonies from project participants, lively music, and heartfelt speeches. Lillian guided everything with remarkable calm and confidence, moving gracefully through the crowd, comforting the shy, and encouraging the bold. When the microphone was finally passed to Oliver, the vibrant buzz in the square went quiet, all eyes turning to him. He stepped onto the stage, a serious expression on his face, but his eyes were shining with an uncharacteristic light. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began, his voice clear and resonant. "Today, I'm not speaking as a CEO or a businessman. I'm speaking as someone who's been changed by this community, by this project, and by one person in particular." Lillian's eyes widened, and she stopped where she was, utterly stunned. "When I first met this woman, I was a very different person. I believed success meant control, that results came from the top down, and that emotions were just distractions." A few soft, understanding laughs spread through the audience. "She came into my life unexpectedly. First, as my son's nanny, Then as someone who wasn't afraid to speak her mind, to challenge my assumptions, and to show me the true meaning of courage and purpose. Her mind, someone who stood up to me, challenged me, and changed me. He paused, swallowing hard, his voice thick with emotion. Lillian, you showed me that real leadership comes from the heart. That empathy isn't weakness, it's strength. That taking care of others is what truly matters. He took a deep breath and looked at Leo, who immediately got the signal. The boy walked purposefully up to the stage, clutching a small blue box. All eyes in the charming crowd followed him, captivated. "Dad," Leo said, handing him the box with a wide, innocent smile. "Is it time?" "It is." Oliver knelt on the stage, his gaze fixed solely on Lillian. The entire crowd went utterly silent, leaning forward. "Lillian Cruz," he began, his voice clear and resonant as he opened the box, revealing a pair of simple, elegant rings. "Would you change the rest of my life by saying yes?" Lillian covered her mouth with both hands, tears already streaming down her cheeks. Her eyes were wide, and her breathing came in short, rapid gasps. "Oliver, I love you, and I want to build a life with you. A real life. With Leo, with our flaws, with everything we are and everything we could be." She started to laugh through her tears, a joyful, disbelieving sound. "This is absolutely unexpected." "I know," he replied, his eyes shining, "but it's also absolutely real." "You did all this!" She motioned to the vibrant setup, the bustling event, the stage itself. "With help from the amazing team you built," he corrected gently. "And Leo knew." Leo nodded enthusiastically. "He rehearsed with me." "What if I had said no?" she teased, wiping a tear from her eye. "Then we'd have to come up with a very sad alternate ending," he replied, making the crowd chuckle softly. She slowly stepped down the stairs, walking up to him on the stage. She stood in front of Oliver, still on one knee, and held out her hand, still trembling, slightly. "You're crazy a little, and very stubborn. Definitely. And still I say yes." The plaza erupted in thunderous applause. Leo jumped and shouted with uncontainable joy, "She said yes!" and ran over to hug them both fiercely. Oliver, with trembling hands, slid the ring onto her finger, and she did the same for him. Then he stood and pulled her into a long, tight embrace. The kiss that followed felt like the natural, inevitable culmination of that moment. Light, real, filled with laughter and tears all at once. Meanwhile, across the city, in a sleek, dimly lit apartment, Meredith, Kensington, was watching the live broadcast of the event with a drink in her hand. Her phone slipped slightly from her fingers as she watched the footage of Oliver kneeling on stage, a genuine smile transforming his face. "This can't be happening," she muttered, her eyes fixed on the screen, a storm brewing within her. In a last-ditch attempt to ruin the moment, she opened her laptop, pulled up an unfinished file filled with old documents and damaging clippings about Lillian's past, and began preparing an anonymous post, meticulously crafted to stir up old controversies and sow doubt. But something happened. Before she could even click publish, she saw the comment section of the live stream flood with an overwhelming wave of messages. "What a beautiful love story. Never seen Mr. Blackwell smile like that. This woman changed everything. So inspiring. We need more leaders like her." Meredith slammed the laptop shut with a frustrated growl. The damage wouldn't land anymore. Public opinion was overwhelmingly on their side, and more importantly, so was Oliver. Back at the plaza, Leo ran through the booths, proudly wearing the colorful flower crown he had made for his new Mom. Lillian and Oliver walked hand in hand, being greeted by neighbors and team members, their faces glowing with a happiness that felt both new and eternally right. Members. Was that all really real? She asked, her eyes still wet with happy tears. As real as the project you created, he replied, his voice firm and sincere. As real as everything I feel for you. So we're engaged, she laughed, a joyful, disbelieving sound. Officially, with plenty of witnesses. I have one condition already, she announced. I want a simple ceremony right here with the community. With Leo up at the altar with live music and food prepared by the women from our project. Done. Agreed. Signed. He said immediately, a wide smile on his face. She laughed again. Are you really willing to do all this? I'm willing to be with you, Lillian. The breeze blew gently once more, rustling through the leaves in Osanespas, and the sky, now painted in hues of golden orange, seemed to bless this new, beautiful chapter. 3 months passed swiftly since the heartfelt proposal in the square. 3 months of simple planning, of warm meetings with the community, and decisions guided more by the heart than by any rigid protocol. Oliver and Lillian's wedding took place on a sunny Saturday in the very same place where he had. I knelt down. But now, the square was utterly transformed. Delicate flower arches decorated the path among the trees. White chairs were neatly lined up in front of a small, charming stage, and soft, joyful music filled the air. Neighbors, co-workers, volunteers, and friends were all there, their eyes bright, their phones in hand to capture every moment, their smiles genuine and abundant. Leo walked in carrying a small pillow with 2 custom-made rings. He looked so neat in his little suit, his face beaming. He could hardly stop smiling. Oliver waited at the altar, dressed in a dark blue suit with no tie, his hair gently tousled by the wind. When some children in the front row saw him, they whispered excitedly, "He looks nervous!" And they were right. But all that nervous tension disappeared the moment Lillian appeared. She walked slowly, elegantly, wearing a simple, graceful dress with delicate lace at the sleeves and a flowing hem. Her hair was pinned up with fresh flowers gathered from the community garden. Her eyes were full of tears, and when they met his, nothing else in the world seemed to matter. Tears fell freely before a single word was spoken. The efficient, visibly moved officiant led the ceremony with great care and warmth. The vows were shared honestly and gently, each word a promise whispered from the heart. And the kiss sealed not just a marriage, but the profound union of 2 worlds that had learned to understand each other and, in doing so, to heal. Married life wasn't a sudden, jarring change, but more like a natural, harmonious continuation of what they were already building together. The social impact program, once limited to the city, started gaining national visibility. With Oliver and Lillian leading side by side, new centers were opened in other states, always respecting local culture and focusing on what people truly needed. Lillian organized the teams, led the comprehensive training, and kept a close, compassionate watch over every pilot project. Her innate ability to listen, to care deeply, and to transform challenges into opportunities was the driving force behind the program's undeniable success. Oliver, in turn, truly learned to step out of the office. He began visiting sites regularly, eagerly joining community meetings, and sometimes even helped out himself, quite literally. During the construction of a new library in a small rural town, he was famously seen carrying bricks and drinking coffee from a metal mug alongside the local workers. The photo went viral, and the image of the stoic CEO with the impeccable tie began to be replaced by that of the man who learned to connect, to contribute, and to truly care, to listen. Within the company, the change was even deeper. Lillian took on a new, unofficial role, the bridge between the upper floors and the regular offices. It began with casual conversations in the cafeteria, then evolved into structured listening groups with employees, and soon she proposed a company-wide wellness committee that became part of Blackwell's official structure. She launched mentoring programs for young talent, actively encouraged creative breaks, and brought in training that focused profoundly on the human side of leadership. Some executives frowned at first, wary of these unconventional approaches, but once they saw satisfaction and productivity numbers consistently rise, they realized something genuinely transformative was at play. Oliver, now more approachable and connected to everyone, was often seen walking the halls unhurried, stopping to listen to ideas, joining impromptu birthday gatherings, and even having lunch at the interns' table. "That man has changed," the employees would whisper. But those who truly knew him understood he hadn't just changed. He had finally allowed himself to be who he had always wanted to be. Leo, now more confident and happier than ever, lived a routine full of boundless love. His parents were there for every school meeting, cheering in the stands at soccer games, and always, always there for bedtime. The moment he looked forward to the most. Lillian kept singing her made-up lullabies, their melodies weaving magic into the quiet room, and Oliver sat by the bed, just listening, a peaceful smile on his face. "Will you sing to me too tonight, Mommy?" Leo would sometimes ask, his voice sleepy. "Only if you promise me you'll dream about the stars," she'd reply. "I always dream about stars," he'd whisper back, his eyes already closing. "But now I dream about you two too." It was on an ordinary afternoon, during a meeting with the social impact team, that the invitation arrived. A golden envelope delivered by a discreet messenger. Inside was a letter signed by a National Committee for Sustainable Development and Social Innovation. "For your remarkable progress, cultural transformation, and the meaningful impact achieved in such a short time, we are honored to invite Mr. Oliver Blackwell and Miss Lillian Cruz to receive the National Social Innovation Award." There would be a prestigious ceremony in Washington the following month, complete with extensive media coverage and the presence of government officials, key investors, and international organizations. Lillian's eyes widened, her hands clutching the letter. Oliver smiled, his chest swelling with pride. "This is yours, Lillian. You're the one who built all of this." "We built it together," she corrected softly. "But you're the one who taught me how to start." The next night, sitting on the porch at home, the two of them gazed up at the sky, a vast canvas of stars above them. "You know," Lillian said, resting her head gently on his shoulder, "I used to think happiness was something far away, a specific Sunday, a certain place, a dream I had to chase." She paused, a contented sigh escaping her lips. "And now I think it's right here." He took her hand, holding it firmly, a promise in his touch. "And this is just the beginning." From the bedroom, Leo's voice carried through the quiet evening. "Are you going to come sing to me? Or are you just out there being all lovey-dovey?" They laughed, a shared joyous sound. "We're coming," they answered together, and they got up, ready for another ordinary night. One of those that, deep down, turns out to be the most extraordinary of all. The plane landed smoothly at Washington's airport. Outside, the sky was painted with shades of gold and soft pink, the last remnants of daylight fading into twilight, and blue, as if welcoming a new chapter in their story. Lillian adjusted her coat over her shoulders and looked out the window, a soft smile on her lips. "Can you believe that 3 months ago, you were just telling me not to be late for a gala dinner? Oliver smiled beside her, a warmth in his eyes. And now, you're the star of the biggest social award in the country, and I still get nervous about interviews. Just be yourself, she advised, taking his hand. That's what made the world pay attention. The hotel where they stayed was elegant but understated. Lillian had turned down anything too fancy, preferring simple comfort over excessive luxury. In the room, Leo was joyfully jumping between the beds, wearing a little tuxedo, his grin wide. "Can I wear this to the ceremony?" he asked excitedly. "You can," Oliver said, trying to sound serious. "Just don't wrinkle your shirt." Lillian finished putting on her lipstick, then turned to both of them, her eyes sparkling. "Ready?" "You look beautiful, Mommy," Leo shouted, running to hug her legs. "And you two look amazing, my two princes," she replied, kneeling to embrace him. The ceremony took place in a magnificent event center with a soaring glass ceiling and glittering floating chandeliers. Hundreds of people from all over the country were there. Distinguished community leaders, successful business owners, dedicated educators, and curious journalists. When the winners of the National Social Innovation Award were announced, the names Lillian Cruz and Oliver Blackwell echoed through a wave of enthusiastic applause. Lillian stepped onto the stage, her heart racing with a mix of exhilaration and disbelief. Oliver, holding Leo's hand, followed her, a proud, radiant smile on his face. "Good evening," she began, holding the microphone with slightly trembling hands, her voice clear despite the emotion. "If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be here tonight, I would have laughed. And maybe cried, too." A few soft laughs rippled through the audience. This story didn't begin in a think tank or a strategy room. It began with a short message, an unexpected offer, and a CEO. She looked at Oliver with a playful smile, who was indeed a little too bossy. More laughter, warmer this time. But above all, it started with a challenge, proving that social impact isn't charity. It's vision. It's smart planning. It's a real commitment to the people who build this country every single day. Oliver took the microphone for a moment, his gaze sweeping over the impressed faces in the audience. "And sometimes," he added, his voice low and sincere, "to start a revolution, all you really need is to listen to someone you never thought you would." After the award ceremony, the two were invited to a live interview on the event's official channel. The host, smiling broadly, ended with one final question, her eyes full of genuine curiosity. "Oliver, Lillian, how did the two of you meet?" They looked at each other and burst out laughing, a natural, easy sound. "That's a good one," Lillian said, still chuckling. "Want to start?" "Better if you tell it," Oliver replied, his eyes dancing with amusement. "I'll add the funny parts after." Oliver looked at the camera, a genuine smile transforming his face. "It all started when my assistant said I needed a new nanny, and he thought it would be a good idea to invite her to a gala dinner just to impress some partners. I didn't have a better option at the time." "Thanks," she replied, rolling her eyes playfully, still laughing. "She accepted reluctantly," Oliver continued, "and showed up in a red dress that stopped the whole party. Then someone mistook me for an executive. His ex-fiancée humiliated me in front of everyone," Lillian interjected, her voice light, playful, public. "I didn't defend her. Big mistake, huge. But from that moment on," Oliver continued, his voice softening, "I really started to see her. And then he offered me a contract to pretend we were dating." "For 2 months," the host added, smiling, completing their sentence. "They ended up married." "Sometimes love shows up disguised as a temporary contract," Lillian said, her eyes calm and wise. "But what's real stays," Oliver added, looking at her with an undeniable tenderness. The host ended with a wide smile, thanking them for a story that was now inspiring the whole country. That same night, in the elegant events ballroom, the last song began to play. Soft, warm lights filled the space, and a string quartet played an instrumental version of "Can't Help Falling in Love." Oliver held out his hand to Lillian, a silent invitation. "May I have this dance?" "With pleasure." The two of them danced together, smiling and exchanging gentle looks, as if time had slowed down just for that moment. Then Leo ran up to them, climbed onto his father's feet, and eagerly held Lillian's hand. "Can I dance with you too?" he asked, his eyes bright. "Can he?" Lillian asked Oliver, her gaze soft. "This dance is yours too, astronaut," Oliver said, wrapping him in a warm hug, pulling him closer. And the three of them danced together, slowly, gently, in the center of the warmly lit room. No camera flashes, no rush, no script, just them, a family in the truest sense of the word. And as they turned gently to the rhythm of the music, Lillian whispered, her voice barely audible, "This wasn't anything like I imagined." "Me neither," Oliver replied, his voice equally soft. "But it turned out better. Much, much better." Standing quietly at the entrance, observing from a respectful distance, the same journalist from the interview jotted down one final, poignant note in her notebook. Sometimes love shows up disguised as a temporary contract, but what's real always stays.